we'll go ahead and get started. Start with agenda management. Entertain motion second to accept the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll move on to public forum. Yeah, Harry.
Here. You probably think I'm going to ask about solar, so I won't disappoint. Say I'm asking for a friend. If I were to desire to set up a solar array, to which office should I go to get the information about ordinances and requirements and capacities and that sort of thing?
For the ordinance side, you'll want to go through planning and zoning. Planning and zoning
Yep.
here at City Hall.
Right here.
Yep. They'll give you the ordinance for the requirements for that. For the interconnection side, just come to our office and we can get you the
Okay.
interconnection agreements.
Okay.
For that. It's a simple application to fill out. Mostly, we're just concerned about the size and location of what's going to be on the system, so
Okay.
that's a pretty easy application, but
And I think you need probably a couple of months of utility bills, or you can furnish that yourself. I
Yeah, we
guess.
got all that.
Yeah. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
All right, very good. Anything else? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public forum. Move on to the consent agenda item. Entertain motion second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on it? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda items are approved. All right, we'll move on to action items, financial audit. Are we ready with them, or do we want to move on?
Kate, you're gonna be on here.
So if you switch your monitor to B, you can see it.
Yeah. I need to get you bigger on our screen here. You can go ahead and start.
Okay. Yes, I'm Kate Fanworth. I'm a senior associate at Waverly, and we just finished up the fiscal year 24 financial statement audit. So I just wanted to give a brief recap of how things went. Overall, things went very well with the audit. Everything went smoothly. I don't think we ran into any issues along the way. And if you looked at the report at all, you can see we did not have any findings either with the financial statement numbers or in state compliance. So that is great news. Best that you can do. Just to give kind of an overview, if you haven't seen financial statements in the past, it does touch on a couple things. One of the first things included is the management discussion and analysis. I believe that's on pages 4 to 11. That presents 3 years of information right here in the 2 prior years, and that is probably the best overall recap if you're trying to get a sense of the information in the financial statements in a more summarized manner. After that, there is the full financial statement numbers, followed by the notes, which have some more details on some of the most significant balances in the statements. Then we have a couple other tables of year-by-year information for pension and OPEB, some statistics, and finally at the end our audit report, which states that there are no findings and that you're in compliance for everything. As far as the financial information itself, operations and everything very similar to the prior year. No major changes. There was one new standard implemented this year, GASB 101, which changed compensated absences slightly. Those numbers were fairly immaterial, but that is why there's a restatement in there. And the IFRS numbers came out recently, so those will probably be new if you've been following financial information since the end of the year. overall, like I said, everything was really good, no findings, no significant changes on our side anyway, that are expected to be in effect in the next year. So, unless you have any other questions, that's about what I've got.
Questions?
I got one question. We're going to be talking about investments and, maybe talking about changing our investment policy to IPATE. I mean, can you talk about what other utilities are doing and for investments?
I'm sorry, can you say that last part again?
How other utilities are handling their investments? So,
What other people are investing in, other utilities, handling the investments.
Sure, I would have to look into that, but if you'd like, I can check, or I can have Brad Tyson check if he's been involved with all the utility audits and get back to you on that.
great.
Right, entertain motion second to approve the financial audit.
So moved.
Second.
See, Angie, is this a resolution that we need?
No, it can be voice.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Financial audit is approved. Move on to item B, Resolution 14-25, the Iowa Public Agency Investment Trust. Kelly?
So the Iowa Public Agency Investment Trust, that is an organization that is under Iowa Code Section 28E, and it is also under Code Section 331.555, 384.21, so it's checking all the boxes that we're required to. We bring this resolution to expand our investment options. We would like to open an account with IPAT in the Diversified Fund. The Diversified Fund provides daily liquidity and is rated AAA by S&P. I have checked the investment policy and it's in compliance. I think that we started to get this resolution in place several years ago, so I didn't see anything that needed to be changed with that. You had asked about other organizations that, so interestingly enough, several of the people who are on the board there are people that I've met at conference. And I also reached out to Jesse Otto at CFU, Muscatine's in it, CFU, Spencer. So if they're on the board, I assume that they're investing in these things. And I asked Jesse, his take on it, and he said, yes, they use it. They use it kind of like a money market type of account because you can pull it when you need to. Just as an aside, also is that from the March 31st, 2025 IPATE, it showed that their average rate was 4.13, and right now we're getting from First National Bank 2.4. That rate is indexed to the federal funds rate, so gives us a little bit of opportunity for maybe a little bit more return on our investment. Any questions?
How much money are we talking about moving?
So we right now have $7 million sort of in First National Bank for WMEU, and so we could define that. You could put a limit on what we want to do, or if you feel comfortable enough, it's in one institution, it's in another. I asked about it being covered by the FDIC type of insurance, and it is, I'm being told it is just like any other facility that we deal with, any other institution. So if you want to limit it because of some concerns, I guess that would be something that we can talk about, but I wasn't bringing a limit. We were just going to access cash, monitor cash flow, see what payables are, and bring money back, kind of test it out.
And that's the reason I mean, how much excess cash What are we talking about?
So we would, of course, we have interest bond payments coming due June 1st, those sorts of things. We would need just to keep track of the cash flow. I wasn't really going to limit it, if you wanted to put 3 million in it to get a little bit extra rate. But if you want it to be limited to 1 million or to whatever, I guess that's a discussion point that the board can give us. It would follow the investment policy, but really the investment policy is CDs and long-term investments, but this is more of a liquid investment.
So you're proposing to take some of our CDs and move them?
No, the CDs have a term date on it, but we have money sitting in our checking account, savings account, other money markets that we could get a higher interest rate
Right.
on
I
those.
got that.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to take any CDs,
We've got
but,
3 million in checking?
yeah.
Yeah, if you get down to our financials, it's there, so.
That's unencumbered in a CD type thing. So
How long has this been out there and what's its history been?
I think it's been out there quite a while because it looks like we tried to get into it a while back. Bob actually brought it to our attention. So I think it's been a while.
The board, if you recall, back in 1988 approved a resolution. It was a while back. For whatever reason, staff at the time in 1988 didn't move into the iPay accounts, but they had an approved resolution that we'd come across. This is really updating today's version of the agreement with iPay, but for whatever reason, I don't know what happened in the last 30-some odd years, but it's been around for a while.
Okay.
And Kelly's point, Bob had brought it up at a couple meetings ago that was a possibility. So just another financial institution that we can look at.
Okay.
Does the Waverly City use this?
Yes. County uses it. School district uses it. So they seem to be very flexible. I think 3:30s are cutoff time, somewhere around in the late.
Don't know that,
Yeah.
but that would be a standard bank type, 3:30.
And, obviously we could also use this as a negotiation tool too, say, hey, to a bank or whoever, we can get this at iPay, what can you do for us? So I like it open-ended, so
Okay.
that's good. My question is, do you need one or two? Will the communication ever potentially use this? Should be separate or communication utility if they have excess money?
Yeah, they have to be separate. We have to keep everything separate for the audit. And so if we do one because we've written this for Waverly Utilities.
Yep.
So I understand that it should be either or,
Okay.
WMEU or WCU, if that was the intent. But yeah, the money definitely they have to be separate.
Yep, great.
All right, entertain motion second to approve resolution 14-25.
Move approval.
Second. So do we have to amend this to say and/or communications? Is that what you're?
No, we wrote it under Waverly Utilities.
Okay, so then you got it. Okay.
Yeah, we should be okay.
Other discussion, questions? All right, Angie?
Brunkhorst,
Aye.
Kettleson,
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes?
Hanson,
Yes.
Kalen.
Aye.
All right, resolution 14-25 is approved. So finally, after 37 years, we're gonna move some money there. All
Better
right,
than I am. Just kidding.
not me. All right, information items, what do you got, Kurt?
Have anything?
All right. Or other business, where do you like to bring these things up?
I'm a clean slate on that one as well, so.
And board calendar,
Well, other business.
Oh, okay.
Could you just provide a solar update for the public?
The solar update?
Yeah. Okay, is that okay?
We can do it under the lease estoppel.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I can do it there if you like.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
kind of figured we'd talk about, yeah. I don't know if we had anything on the board calendar. we should look at? Anything, Angie? Okay, we'll move on. All right, move on to the electric utility action items, the financials. Kelly?
So what you have in front of you is the March 2025 financials. Year-to-date total revenue, we're over budget by $113,000. Customer revenues were over by $60,000. That's made up of industrial being under by $30,000, ECA under by $59,000, and residential over by $116,000. Kilowatt sales for the month compared to last year were greater than, they were 802,000 greater than prior year. Residential was over by 677, commercial by 77,000. Expenses were $40,000 worse than year-to-date budget. This brings us to a net income of $121,000 better than year-to-date budget. Cash and investments down, sits at $15,396,000. That is a huge increase of $660,000, which we do not normally see with the utility. A couple of items that are really timing differences. Mean paid the March bill in March, so they paid 2 bills and caught them up. So you'll see a flip in cash next month. We also had higher receipts that kind of pushed that over, so the net income was in the previous month and the receipts in the next month. There is no change in the outstanding debt, but as I mentioned before, we will be paying interest on those bonds June 1st, which really comes through in May. And that would be about it.
Need a motion second to approve.
So
Move
moved.
approval.
Second.
Any questions? All right, all those in favor of approving financials, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Financials are approved. Reimbursement resolution. Kelly?
Monthly standard reimbursement resolution shows us to having a monthly total of $3,841 and a running total of $1,184,000. Request approval.
So moved.
Second.
Angie?
Kettleson,
Yes.
Bronkhorst.
Aye.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kaler,
Aye.
Buckingham.
Yes, all right. Resolution 15-25, reimbursement resolution is approved. Resolution 16-25, approving the lease estoppel agreement between Waverly Utilities and Southeast Municipal of Iowa.
Yes, it's a new, yes.
New
the,
company?
Well, Sandhills has changed their name. So it is now Southeast Municipal Iowa LLC. Still Sandhills, same people. I don't know if they acquired other companies. I don't know. Not sure what the name change was. But the lease estoppel is I received this back in late April. Appears Sandhills Southeast Municipal Iowa LLC is still securing financing for the solar array project. Their lender had supplied this document to have the utility review to verify that there hasn't been any significant changes to the property since we acquired it. Being because it's tied to the original lease that the board approved back in 2022. That was when the lease agreement was approved, and if you recall, in late 2023 is when we secured the property for the project. They needed to verify that there weren't any significant changes, that we didn't grant any easements, we didn't build an outbuilding on it. Somebody laid claim to the property that didn't have ownership rights to it. So basically, we had to reopen of the title opinion, abstract review, and such. Took a little bit to get through all that. Ehlers and Cooney has reviewed all the documents as well. Basically, just again, kind of I'd call it more of a soft real estate transaction, but a review of the overall property. There were no significant findings to that. So what the request today is the resolution to sign the lease estoppel so Sandhills Energy can continue with their securing their financing for the project. So that's what's before you. Bob had a question about the update. There's not much to report because there's no activity right now, as in Sandhills is still acquiring their financing. I have that he couldn't get a real definitive time frame when they were going to have that completed. And more or less, I was trying to get to a point where maybe we'll start seeing construction. If you recall, we extended the construction window to December 31st, 2025. So we've got a few months to go in the year yet, but I did get a little bit out of Sand Hills that once they get their finances secured, they'll be moving into mobilizing the construction of the project, which should basically be like a pre-construction meeting, and then starting work at some point. But I don't have any firm dates, times, or anything of that nature at this moment.
Do they have other projects where they've gone back to get funding, and how did that go?
It's gone well. This is Nebraska utilities that were in this original group of 20 utilities that partner with Sand Hills. Their projects were done at the end of last year, and it kind of went the same format with their financing. So I'm not seeing really anything too out of the ordinary with it. It's just very time consuming. But the Nebraska projects have all been wrapped up, and then the Iowa projects were on a separate umbrella that they were going to focus on, which is where they're at right now. So I would anticipate, I don't know, sometime soon construction getting started. But.
Thanks.
Bless you.
All right. Entertain motion second to approve Resolution 16-25.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Any other questions for Kurt? Discussion.
Kurt, once again, we're going to be leasing this ground, and then at the end of 25 years, we get it back with the equipment on. They will own that equipment, so do you have any idea yet on what the property tax might be? Or what the value?
The value I do not. So we've gone through the abatement process of the property taxes for the land.
For the land, but everything above that.
As the equipment value, I have no confirmation or numbers on that. So.
Okay.
All right, Angie?
Kaler,
Aye.
Edelson,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Runkhorst.
Aye.
Hanson.
Yes.
Resolution 16-25 is approved. Moving to information items, next is the Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska's presentation. Angie?
Kyle, this would be you, I believe.
All right,
I never get on that.
let me know if you can see my screen.
We can.
Excellent. Well, it's an honor and privilege to be able to speak to you today, so thank you for the opportunity to do so. A wise mentor of mine once told me, Kyle, reality hurts, but truth kills. Or denial kills. Reality and truth are the same, forgive me. Reality hurts, denial kills. And that's very much true in what's going on in electric markets today. Just want to talk through a lot of the realities that we're facing as an organization, as we're facing as an industry, and why we ultimately ended up raising rates, which went into effect April 1st of 25. First, one reality that we face is a diverse footprint. This is meaning we serve Waverly, who on the eastern edge of our footprint, all the way over to as far west as Delta, Colorado, on the western front of the Rockies. We have a wide range of communities, diverse in size, diverse in customer base, but that is a reality that we face. And with this range, you'll see a little bit later the reality of an expanding electric wholesale market and how that impacts our footprint as a whole. Even though Waverly isn't necessarily included in that expansion, how it impacts us as a whole. Another reality, challenge, is the timeline that we face. Here is our mean budget timeline. I'll start at the end, our fiscal year, again, April 1st, 2025 is the start date. Moving backwards, the board approved the budget on January 23rd. Finance committee meeting was held the day prior to review and recommend. A month prior, in December, is when the finance committee gets a first chance to look at those rates and charges and provide some input and feedback. Going back even further, the first chance that our committee gets a chance to look at budget information is in the middle of October, when we provide information related to our staffing, other A&E, administrative and general costs. So between the October and December timeframe, we are receiving budget information as late as the end of November, which is why I'm sure Waverly, as all of our other participants say, could we have had an earlier idea that this was coming? Because what I did not lay out here is your timeline from your budget approval, your rates going live, your budget compilation. So that's the challenge that we face and the reality that we face. And we understand that that's a challenge. But a lot of the information that we received in this year did happen around that late October into November timeframe. And if you had asked me early October what were the rates looking like, I would not have said what they ended up being, which was that 9.8% increase that we ended up taking. So we received a lot of information, and every piece of information as we received it, we had to adjust and put together the best plan, which is ultimately board approved in January. So what does that cost look like for us? On the left of this graph is we had $125.3 million in our last fiscal year. So costs are going up. Costs increased 9%, $136.7 million. Now, you were a student hearing me, I said you raised rates 9.8%, costs went up 9%. Just worth noting, as we have a DG policy, which Waverly is taking advantage of to install some solar. That solar does decrease the volume sales that we have, so with slightly fewer volumes, the rate is, we had to increase went slightly higher than the increase of that cost of 9%. As far as the components, there's really three things driving our costs this year. There's wholesale power market expansion, plant capital O&M, and the other power and wholesale power related costs. We're going to focus on that last one first. This is our standard increase. We've got long-term purchase power agreements with escalators. We've got facilities that have generally coal costs or fuel costs increase year over year. General other market costs can increase year over year. If we didn't have those first two items and we just had this last column, we would have seen a much more modest rate increase, closer to maybe 3%. But these first two items are the items that we can specifically point to and say, these two items are why we had to take a larger rate increase. First, talk about that wholesale power market expansion. So SPP, the Southwest Power Pool, as you can see in light green, is as it stands today, and the dark green is the area that it is expanding to. Now, if I were to flip back and look at that map, and if I were able to overlay that map onto here to see where our mean participants lay on this map, all participants except for I believe 3 of them in the Colorado, Wyoming now fall under this dark green area. There are a small handful that still are in that light gray area, and that expansion allows for opportunity for me. When we heard about this expansion, we had to step back and determine, do we want to be a part of this? Do we want to join the expansion and having communities be a part of it? And ultimately, the decision was, yes, this is a good move for me. We've been operating historically in 3 markets, MISO, which is where Waverly resides, SPP, and then the West. And in the West, there is, I guess, market light in the Weiss market, as well as just bilateral transactions where you're buying and selling directly with a third-party counterpart. But this allows us, this expansion allows me to enter into only navigate 2 RTOs. Because as a benefit of this, that decreases any other potential new expanding markets that could come in that would require a third set of tariffs, third set of rules and regulations that mean you have to then follow and abide by. Whereas joining SPP, which we're already familiar with the rules, or already familiar with the tariffs, we are able to leverage that knowledge and that comfortability with SPP and joining them. Now, one largest piece of this is some implementation costs that are associated with this expansion. There's some software costs, there's some consultants costs, and I think the largest is a implementation of pseudo-tie costs. And pseudo-tie, to just keep it as high level as possible, the communities that are in that gray area This is a way on paper for SPP to recognize that they are part of the SPP footprint through basically a paper transaction. But with that comes implementation costs from both consultants, pipeline meters, RTOs, distribution meters, third-party implementation costs. That is the driver of the costs related to this expansion. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on this first wholesale power market expansion.
This is Bob Buckingham. I mean, the obvious question would be, how are Waverly utility customers benefiting from this expansion into the Southwest Power?
Yep. Yeah, great question, and honestly, one I'm glad you asked. Ultimately, like I said already, going down from 3 to 2 is going to allow us to not have to staff up if we were to have to enter into another RTO market. And right now it's easy to say, hey, why do we have to pay for this? If you recall, go back, I find my fiscal year exactly, we had a rate decrease a handful of years ago, and that was largely due to activity, contract negotiations with our resources in the West. So Waverly was able to benefit and pay lower rates because of our footprint. You know, and this is Kyle Mel speaking. I kind of view it as an investment, right? You have diversification is always a thing to be achieved and desired. When you're operating in such a wide footprint, you get the benefit of that diversification. Now, does that mean that the highs aren't as highs and lows aren't as lows? It does mean that. But that ultimately is what this expansion is bringing to you, and being in this footprint and being part of me is you have that diversification which allow for more stability. And in the rural rates, yes, we want low rates, number one, but right behind it, we want stable rates. Does that answer your question? Was that Bob?
Well, yeah, and I mean, kind of a follow-up question then is, and this is a loaded question, but I'll ask it anyway. I mean, so what I hear you saying is we should anticipate more stable rates in the future and not be seeing a 10% increase as we were sort of surprised by this year.
Yeah, and you saying the word surprise, I was surprised by it this year. So I mean, like I said, that timeline of when we received it, it was shocking that we were seeing this information. Now, our goal long-term, I would agree, that is our goal. You know, the 9.8% is not, no one's happy about that. We're not happy about that, but it is what we needed to do to cover our costs. As far as what's into the future, week by week, depending on what's going on in the current administration with tariffs, we don't even know what that impact is going to be. I would love to be able to tell you, yeah, things are going to be stable and we're not going to see any larger rate increases. We do have a target. That's our goal. That's what we drive for. And I have a slide at the end with all the challenges that we're facing and a rapid change that we are incurring as an industry and an organization. But as an industry as a whole, we're not the only ones seeing these rate pressures. There are transmission providers who are seeing 20% in a single year rate increase. I think the transmission that Waverly incurred is closer to that 10 to 12%. There are other transmission providers saying, hey, 8% this year, another followed by another 8%. Lincoln Electric System just announced a mid-year rate increase after having a rate increase in January. So this isn't unique to us. We're doing our best to adapt and, again, face the realities of an ever-changing market and taking each information as we get it. So I'd love to be able to sit here and say, rates, we're not going to see another rate increase like this. I don't want to, I don't plan on it. It's not something that anyone can promise. And if anyone claims to be able to promise that, they're not going to do it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions on that?
On this one, the wholesale power market expansion of 3.1, how much of that is one-time cost?
Most of it is one-time cost. So that is the nice thing about this. Of it, I'd almost, the ongoing is pretty small. I can be less than, I don't know exactly. The upfront implementation, I know, of the pseudo tie is about $2.5 million of that 3.1. There are some ongoing costs with both the pseudo-guide, the software, some consultants, but the large majority of that is one-time costs.
So next year, it should be a much more favorable increase.
Well, I would agree from next year's rate impact and the pressure, upward pressure on rates, I wouldn't anticipate the SPP expansion to be part of that conversation.
Great, we got that recorded.
Then be sure to report my previous statement, but I don't think yeah, but first of all, any other questions here before I go to the next one?
This is Jackie Hansen. I have a question for you.
All right, other item is capital and ultimately, this is continuing.
Kyle, hold on just a
Yeah.
second. We have one more person here who has a question. Jackie, she's one of our board members.
Okay,
Hi Kyle, I've got a question for you.
Can you hear her?
I cannot, sorry.
Do you want to tell them what my question is?
I'll
So,
tell her.
basically, like, their fiscal year went through April 1 of this year. Most all the utilities are going to be setting our budgets December, January timeline. Do they have any plans to start changing their fiscal year so that it more closely matches their customers' fiscal year?
Did you hear any of that?
I heard something along the lines, I understand the question, I heard more in the second half. You're saying, is there any plans to change our fiscal year or anyone's fiscal year to make it more, to fix the timing issue? Is that the question?
Yeah, compatible with all of your
Yeah.
customers
So-
and all the other utilities.
So another reality is a lot of those fiscal years, I believe Nebraska's fiscal year and Colorado's fiscal year as utilities are set, in which I think, oh man, can't quote me on this one. I know one ends or starts September 1st. So we've got fiscal years all over the board across our whole footprint. The short answer is no. No one's planning on changing fiscal years. Because if we change fiscal years, it just changes the challenge of who's impacted by that. So right now, there are no plans to change fiscal year.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else? Otherwise, I'll continue here. All right, as far as capital goes, on that second line, it's capital and O&M. And even before we're talking with this slide, that capital and O&M, that's cost to keep our units, our long-term units, our assets operable and running. It has nothing to do with increasing capability. This is just to keep, if you compare it to a car, keep the engine running, keep it operable, keep it reliable, so that we can maintain and operate our units effectively, economically in the wholesale markets. Capital in particular, though, is seeing some upward pressure compared to years past. The green column, that is our fiscal year that we are just entered into April 1st. You see $7.4 million, and we see a projection of what capital costs may look like over the next handful of years. I will say this, as in my decade here of doing this, our capital costs, those long-term capital costs, swing wildly each year, or always, especially that last year, 2030, 31, that 3.3 million, that's the one where I could guarantee it's not going to be that by the time we get there. That 7.4 million is the largest we've seen in my time here. You see that red line, that 4.3 million is over the past 5 years. What have we averaged? We've averaged about 4.3 million, and you can see into the future, that average now in the black line jumps up to 6.2 million. And we even have a year in 28, 29 right now, preliminarily, but we're hitting even 9.0 million. Now, it is worth noting in 27, 28, and fiscal year 28, 29, there are capital costs from one of our coal facilities for a potential fuel conversion from coal to natural gas. Now, whether or not that happens, there's going back to what is happening in the White House in the current administration, as far as attempting to cut regulation. Will this plan with current coal facility come into effect? That determines to be seen. But I can say of that, we have 3 other coal facilities that have not put into their capital budgets any sort of fuel conversion, even though that is part of conversations of all of those facilities. So translation, there's a lot of potential variability in what capital costs could look like over the next few years, both from a strategic plan from the coal operators, the coal plant operators, to an environmental regulation, following environmental regulations, as well as just current administration and investment opportunity there from whether or not economically it makes sense to do. Any questions here on capital? O&M, let me check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. It's good. One thing to note is, and as you're all aware, mean is only a portion. It is the larger portion, but it is only a portion of your wholesale power costs. You do have your transmission costs that you get from ISO. Like I said, I believe you're at a 10 to 12% increase. I think that was effective January 1st that you're facing there. So on top of all of the transmission costs and mean costs, you obviously are taking into consideration your distribution system, what your current state of your system is, and layering on your own costs as you develop your own rates. This is a slide I referred to earlier. Ultimately, we are entering a period of rapid change. Any of these words here, they're not just buzzwords. As I was reviewing this, if you knew which one of these topics impacted individual staff members at meeting, you could come here, stand outside their office or cubicle, whisper any one of these and you'd increase their blood pressure. These are things that we are sitting up, at least I am, in the middle of eating dinner with your family and just chewing on that. What capacity accreditation, how is that impacting on planning reserve margin and resource adequacy? What does that mean for future costs? These aren't just buzzwords. These are real challenges and real realities that we are attempting to face, take on head on, plan for, as well as from a rate perspective, ensuring that our rates cover all of these realities. That's what I have from a presentation perspective. Any other questions while you have me here?
Well, question I was asking Kurt about before the meeting started, these kinds of costs are wholesale energy costs and so on, and transmission costs are passed through to our customers via energy cost adjustment, ECA. So, we have a base cost of those types of things set. I think it's 6.2 cents per kilowatt hour, something like that. And then we have the actual costs, and there's a rolling average and so on that sort of smooths it out. But basically, it's our actual wholesale costs versus this base. And when it looks to me like over time, if we're looking at 9-10% increase this year and future increases, somewhat comparable, it won't be too long till our customers are only seeing positive charges from that cost adjustment that we have built in. And we may get to the point where we need to increase our base. Are you familiar with that? And is that the way you see it? I mean, that's what I'm seeing.
So as far as power cost adjustments, I know Waverly, you do take advantage of power cost adjustments. So as far as whether or not you need to increase your base or anything like that, I'm not able to answer that without you guys entering into cost of service study and talking with a vendor, which I'm sure you're doing. That'd be a question I would say for your cost of service consultant and your rate consultants. Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer exactly what means wholesale increased cost means on how you implement and maintain your power cost adjustment structure.
I think it has a direct impact. I mean, it's by far and away the biggest portion of our energy costs, right? I mean, it's basically everything. I'm just asking if we should be thinking about making some change to that base or something, because we can't absorb 10% increases in our wholesale energy costs year after year without having to make some kind of change.
Yeah. I mean, I could say a couple things there. We're doing our best to not have a 10% rate increase every year. I can say that. I can also say, you should be reevaluating your rates. And I say this, anyone who asks, you should be doing that annually. Taking a look at what you have, what your current rate structure is. Not to say that you have to change rate structure completely, but it's something that's at times in periods as we went through it back in 2014, 2015, we overhauled our rate structure completely because our rate structure wasn't covering our costs. That's always something that needs to be considered as part of prudent utility practices. But even without a complete rate structure change, simply just looking at our rates sufficient and our rate structure, especially for the PCA, is that sufficient to cover costs? So that's where I would lean on you have to lean on your rate consultant, bring those concerns to them, let them help you through those challenges.
I'm going to go back to one thing that, one other question for you. I'm sorry, I've got questions, but, so back on your slide where you had the orange bar over on the left, it's your year-over-year cost drivers. And then you had the 3 blue bars. And Bob asked, I think, an excellent question, which was how much of the first bar was, one-time costs. And what I wonder is how much of that total increase, probably in the middle bar as well, are also kind of one-time costs. Maybe some of the capital, you said that fluctuates year to year. But, so I'm kind of wondering how much, if these are one-time costs, you built them into the rate structure for this year, but they go away then next year. So does that mean we could sort of anticipate a rate reduction or at least downward pressure?
So like I said, the wholesale power market thing, and that primarily is one-time cost. I don't think you could say the plant capital and O&M is necessarily one-time cost. Now, does it go up another $5.3 million next year? We'll find out once we receive information, budget information this fall with the updated capital budgets and whether or not fuel conversion is now part of that equation or not. But that is a component of, when we're looking at rates, yes, we look at our next year's costs. But we're also trying to look over the next 5 years and say, what can we do now to keep rates as stable as we can in the future? That was one conversation we had at board level. There was a discussion at one point of maybe if we did 7% or 9.8%, and if we did 7%, there's likelihood for another larger increase in the future. And what's the difference between 7 and 9.8%? Those are, you're really kind of getting into the art of rate making. Yes, you have the science, you have the backing up. We see costs are going up. But ultimately, when we took this rate increase, this one large rate increase, the same large rate increase, the anticipation is to get caught up with our costs. Now, if costs come in next year and there isn't a large increase, we don't see a chart that looks like this. We see a chart that just has that $3 million. That's a success in my book, because then we got ahead or caught up with the costs that we were facing.
Well, there again, I'm looking at this chart and saying, you've already said that there's $2.5 million that should be going the other way, right? Next year. If we're building off of the 2025, 2026 bar,
Yep.
$2.5 million is going down, right?
Yep. So it's a good point. And I know where you're going with that. So even though there's going to be 2.5 going down, let's say that 2.5 goes down, but let's say the 3.0 stays the same. I mean, it's not, ultimately, if you're asking, are we going to be dropping rates next year, that would not be our goal of rate. Well, we'd love to drop rates, as I said, but we don't want to raise rates, drop rates, raise rates, drop rates. We're trying to keep a steady, methodical, intentional, stable rates. So to your point of the $2.5 million, that $2.5 million could be covered by something else. It could be covered by just the general increases in our purchase power contracts. It could be this capital. I mentioned this capital. This only has one of our 4 coal units with any sort of fuel conversion. What happens if fuel conversion comes in and another unit says, we're going to take advantage of this and we're going to also do a fuel conversion to natural gas, and that increases this to where the future average is in 6.2 million, it's 8 million. Well, at that point, your $2.5 million of that one-time cost is now being incurred every year over the next 5 years. We just don't know what's going to happen. But we do know that this 9.8% rate increase that we took helps us catch up. We also have policy. I mean, we're talking about how we set rates. We have our policy, we have cash on hand requirements, cash on hand minimums, we have our bond covenants that we have to keep into consideration. And a large part of those targets are based on our costs. So when costs go up, the minimum threshold, the minimum target that we are striving to achieve also goes up. So that also is something that we've been behind on that minimum target. So even if that $2.5 million, let's say everything else steady and 2.5 isn't there, this catches us up to that, helps catch us up to the minimum targets that we have.
Kyle, I got a question. Long-term, what is the direction of mean? I thought you're gonna phase out of your own power and just become a purchase it. Are you having some capital projects other than the conversion of coal to gas? Or will you be phasing out some old plants, more old plants, or what's your direction there? And when are you gonna be doing some bonding too? So that's
I'm going to punt on this one because we have Brad Hans and Bob Haling on the line for questions just like that. So I'm not sure, Brad or Bob, you want to pop in and answer that?
I struggled a little with Bob. I'm happy to pitch in, and then Brad, you can add what you want. But I struggle a little bit with the question. Can you repeat the question? Was the question what are our plans for additional resources moving forward?
Your capital plan for the next couple of years, can you just talk about that? Are you going to build some new facilities or et cetera, or are you going to go to more of a purchase power person or entity? So talk a little bit about that, and then the next one is any future bonding request to like us.
I can offer a macro view, and I'll ask Brad to kind of dive a little deeper into the weeds. At this particular juncture, in the next couple of years, we don't necessarily have any plans of raising any more capital, because I'm not sure at this particular point that our board has an appetite for any more debt. We will be looking to, you're fully aware of our anticipated vision of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. As we continue to do our integrated resource planning, we're looking at those resources that, have a dispatchable feature to it, but also have a lesser of a carbon footprint. We are talking to a number of municipalities, but this is long range. This is not the next couple of years, but we're in conversations with a number of Nebraska municipalities to potentially look at some joint ownership of new resources in the 5 to 10 year horizon, but nothing immediate. You could pitch in what you want, Brad.
No, I think you've covered it pretty well. That power purchase agreement is really the way we've been going the last several years and looking forward on that. I think with the owned assets, we do have, the board didn't have at this point in time, doesn't really have a strong desire to do more bonding to become facility owners. I think over time we will have to address that in the longer time frame. As we look at our 2050 vision and carbon free in the future or net zero, with the power purchase agreements as a public entity where you generally get the ITCs and the PTCs passed through in your purchase power agreements. So that fits really well from that perspective versus ownership. And while they've opened that up to public power to get some benefit from that if you do own it, at this point in time, we haven't seen where it's significant enough to trend one way or the other. So I think, to your point, we will probably be leaning a lot more on the purchase power agreements. That way you have a good feel for what your costs are gonna be when you set that for a 25-year view, and that helps keep the rates a little more predictable when you know your purchase power pricing moving forward.
And then, talk about the 28, 29, that 9 million, that's the gas fire, that's conversion of one coal plant to gas?
Correct,
Okay.
there's costs in there. I mean, even if you later took that away, I believe that was still north of 6 million if you just got rid of just the fuel conversion costs. But that is why that is a larger year, correct?
Okay, so hopefully you guys are doing some better capital planning that you can smooth some of that capital costs out so it doesn't affect ratepayers on spike. So I would encourage you guys to do better planning and make sure you do some smoothing.
You know, it's not necessarily entirely in our control. The units that we participate in, we're minority interest owners, so we don't have a lot to say in terms of the capital plans for those assets. That's why this graph in particular looks a little choppy. And as Kyle indicated in his presentation, a lot of times in those latter years, there's not a high degree of accuracy in those numbers. We get a little surprised when the majority owners come to us and show us what their capital plan is in the near term and the long term. But, you know, I don't disagree from a planning perspective. It would be nice to take the volatility out of that, but it's really out of our control.
And I can say, so Bob, I agree with you, the costs themselves and how they actually hit year over year, that is truly out of our control for the large part. But from rates perspective, that is our goal, is to keep them stable and steady. So when we're looking long term, this chart doesn't mean that we want to raise rates in 2029 and decrease rates in 29, 30, and decrease them further in 30, 31. Our goal is to have stable rates all throughout. So it takes a look at consideration what it costs look like this year, what costs look like in the next 5 years. So we can do our best with the levers we're able to pull, but how those costs come in, timing of those costs is not a lever that we're able to control.
Thank you.
I think to add to the factors that played into those increases is we hadn't had a lot of major overhauls in those last 5 years where they were spread enough among the different units. What we're getting now with the number of our units is they're at major overhauls coming up. And then no different than what pressures all of our communities are seeing with inflation. The cost of materials, especially steel, transformers, all the electrical components, and labor, it almost had a lagging effect, and it really became clear in the forward looks on the capital that's planned for these facilities. And oftentimes, those capital projects that are, and the outage materials are often bought sometimes years in advance of those projects. So you're seeing now a little bit of catch up as we look in the future years as they're starting to get the equipment together and factor that into their estimates for these overhauls. Those are some of the factors that played into that, and it did have kind of a slingshot effect that we hadn't previously seen.
Great, thank you. And probably a question for Kurt. For our ratepayers, mean electricity is around 7 cents per kilowatt. And then we have to add in transmission, which is like a penny or so. And then after that, it's our distribution cost, staff and stuff like that. So the large portion what the people are paying for is the mean electricity that sometimes we don't have a lot to say into, just kind of like what they're saying to us, but we try to plan our rates accordingly.
Yeah, so Kelly's gonna pull up the graph. It's about 73%, I think, purchase power and transmission cost, I think is what is in the budget.
Yeah.
But that's just the mean portion. And then to your point, we got the local distribution, local generation. our investments in Walter Scott and Eliza for our coal plant investments and operations. So yeah, the local end of it, of wages, is a very small portion of that rate.
Other questions for Kyle? Well, I really appreciate you guys joining us today. It's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead and move on. Department reports. We'll start with, is it Kelly?
The CSR staff continue to perform their day-to-day functions, billing collections, and setting up new accounts. We've been working on the new Springboard accounts payable system, which is a new module in PCS. They're changing everything, and one by one we're switching that over. And today is actually the day that we are going live with that. We did some regulatory filings. We completed the EIA A61 and the electric replacement tax form C.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Kurt, I think you're covering here?
Yes, I'm covering Jen's portion. So Jen, in April, is always the reminder to 811 before you dig to customers and contractors. We heavily promote that message as a friendly reminder so nobody gets hurt or injured or damaged in infrastructure equipment. There's National Line Workers Day, so Jen posted out some stuff on social media for recognition of the hard work that linemen conduct here in our community and throughout the United States. And then our media releases for the Tree Line USA acceptance, the excellence and reliability from American Public Power Association, as well as the Safety Board of Excellence. So each year the utility has to apply for that in reliability and safety award. Basically, we had no lost time accidents in 2024, which is why we received that award. And that is a contributing, speaks highly to the type of utility that the Waverly Utilities runs, is in recognizing safe working environments for the employees, continued safety training that we do monthly, safety training sessions that they attend, just general awareness of the dangerous work they do. So.
Yeah, that was an excellent article in the paper. Hope people saw it.
So I had for Jen's portion. So I can just transition in.
Go ahead.
All right. So crews continued on the LED street light replacement project in the residential areas. Northwest side of Waverly was heavily covered this year. We got just a handful of street lights left to replace, and crews will be finishing those up as their time schedules allow. And then we'll be replacing some street lights along Bremer Avenue. I'm sorry, not Bremer Avenue, on 4th Street Southwest, as time allows later this year as well. Finish up work in the Maple Hills Lane subdivision. There's a few new properties being built in that area that we had to serve telecom and electric services to. Continued work in the Stone Meadow subdivision up to the point where we had to hold off until the road is completed. There's 2 remaining roads in that subdivision that need to be finished. Once the contractor gets that work done, we'll be able to continue on with the infrastructure work there. And then we started the construction season with upgraded services for existing homes and a couple new homes that are being built within the community. Substation and generational work, we moved into some main water jacket valve replacements in the north plant. Mostly these are just kind of the continuing maintenance work that the staff in that department is doing to keep the engines up and functioning. We're continuing on the north substation relay project. We'll be more or less wrapping that work up here by the end of the month. We won't be able to continue too much work there until later this fall, when the substation can be taken offline to make the final completions on that project. And then we conducted the 5-year stack testing on engines 17 through 20. The stack testing certifies the engines and the emission standards set forth by the Department of Natural Resources, that the engines are in compliance and that we can renew our air permits for the next 5 years. So that was completed, and We're still waiting the final results on those, but generally we have about a six-week window from the time that stack testing was finished to the time we get the results. But being that we haven't done much work on those engines and modernization or anything, I don't anticipate any issues on that. That's it.
All right, thanks, Kurt. All right, we'll move on to the communication utility. Looks like we go to department reports, and Jeff, it's already up and going.
No paper, so I'll just try to read this on my computer. So staff have been continuing with cutovers. Fortunately, we've been able to stay ahead of the lawn mowers for any temporary drops and that type of stuff. So I think we're caught up. We're never always going to be fully caught up. Some new install occurs, but for the most part, I think staff are doing good, staying ahead of that. We continue to work on the XGS PON environment, which is the environment that allows us to deliver 10 gigabit services to customers. So that entire platform we continue to work on from an electrical standpoint, a battery backup standpoint, fiber distribution. So that's going well. We can deploy that 10 gig service in every zone within the community. We actually have our first 10 gig customer over the last month. So somebody felt like they needed that level of service. And then staff did complete a lot of the inspections. Once a month we inspect all the pedestals and the fiber routes going from the service that we provide to New Hampton all the way down to Cedar Falls and our meet point with them. And that's worked out well for us. We try to stay ahead of the wildlife and prevent the outages. Let's see. We did some updates over the last month. So whether those be switch updates or the routers in people's homes, we try to stay as current on those as we can to address any security flaws or glitches in the system. So we had a couple conferences over the last month. So we attended the IMU broadband conference, which brings together most of the municipal broadband providers in the state. So it's a good network opportunity. Learn what other companies are doing. The focus this year was a lot on the provisioning systems. We also talked about open networks, white box solutions, AI. We have to talk about AI. And then large data centers. And some of the numbers that this consultant gave on the power requirements and the bandwidth in some of these large data centers is bigger than what the entire city of Waverly could produce. So it's kind of mind-blowing. We did complete or responded to the grant closing documents. So we submitted for the NOFA 7 grant, provided the closing documents. They wanted to see some of those in a little bit different format. We also had to certify, Kelly did, that we were under the one-time audit dollar amount of $750,000 for each year. So we signed off on that. We did migrate our domain, so waverlyutilities.com. There's a domain registration and there's actual hosting. We didn't have a whole lot of control or management of the actual domain, so we took control back of that. And then, like I said, there was a couple conferences. We attended a Calix event, so those attendants were not just municipals. The state of Iowa has a lot of co-ops and independent telecommunications providers, so a lot of those were at the conference too, so good to hear what they're doing. I think Calix, who we use for our fiber switches and the ONTs in the home, are really promoting more of this broadband experience than just focusing on speeds, and what you may subscribe to, which I don't disagree, because I imagine most people don't know what speed they have or what bandwidth they have. They know whether it's reliable, they know the cost, they know some of the features that they have. So we'll continue to monitor that, probably push more of those services that we have, reliable service, customer service, the Wi-Fi, we provide that as our base service, and then we also offer an app for people to control their system. So we'll continue to look at that and see how we can expand it. Any questions?
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Kelly?
So the CSR staff, they completed the Cogsdale upgrade. That's been going on quite a while. We completed the 499Q and the IXC certification. And as Jeff mentioned, we were helpful in the NOFA 7 documentation. And that's about it.
All right, and Kurt?
Back up again. So, Jim completed the April campaign again for the telecom, which kind of coincides with the electric utility on the 811 before you dig. Although they throw a little marketing flair on it with make no bones about it. So she completed that, and then just general telecom ads for the home improvement progress editions of the Waverly newspaper, and just general social media stuff. That's about it.
Questions? All right, thank you. Very good. All right, for Iowa Code 22.7, entertain motion second to move into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Angie?
Kettleson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Buckingham,
Yes.
Brunkhorst,
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
All right, we will move